Hi, everyone. Welcome and welcome back to Cafe Oleh. My name is Jay. Here at Cafe Oleh with Nefesh B'Nefesh, we go over the everyday Hebrew you need here in Israel to succeed, whether that's reading and paying your bills, going grocery shopping and reading nutritional labels, keeping up with the news, striking up a conversation, flirting, dating, job interviewing, complaining, all the everyday things you do in your native language in your country of origin, but here in Israel in modern Hebrew. As always, we'd love to hear from you what topics you'd like us to cover. You can always be in touch with us by email at hebrew@nbn.org.il. You can also see all of our previous classes on YouTube. Just go to youtube.com, type in Cafe Oleh. You'll see the very first entry is a link to our playlist. And there you'll see, I think we're at 130 plus videos, 23,000 views. Our last 80 or so videos come with the vocabulary spreadsheet that we go over as part of the class. So not only can you drop us a note there and even follow us to get all the latest classes there, you can watch all of our classes for free um, on YouTube at your own convenience. And if you're joining us live on Zoom, you can always write to us in the chat window with any questions, comments, concerns, and most importantly, requests for topics for us to cover. With that, let's get started. Also, one last piece of housekeeping for those who are new or forgotten. I will only be looking at the Q&A while in this class, and we ask that you keep the Q&A questions specifically to this specific topic that we're about to start. Any other questions, any other comments, questions, concerns, etc., please put it in the chat and just keep the chat to a minimum because we are currently at 295 people. Always important to point that out, how amazing it is that 295 people have decided at the same time around the world, literally around the world, to learn modern Hebrew. That doesn't really happen anywhere else except here at Cafe Oleh. So really excited that you're all with us. Thank you all. So if you are here in Israel or you're about to come to Israel, you've probably looked at the temperature and you saw that it is definitely not summertime here in Israel. And I always joke, but it's very true. You can tell someone how soon or how recently they've made aliyah by, especially if they use social media a lot and they take pictures of the sun and the beach and they put next to it the temperature in December and January and February, and it's 22 degrees Celsius, and they start mocking everyone else in the world of, ha ha ha, this is winter in Israel. I will let you in on a secret. It's not so much a secret. The longer you're here in Israel, the colder 22 degrees Celsius is, and you're going to feel it in your bones. Why that is, we're going to go over today's class. Today's class is all about wintertime in Israel. Some of you have been here before in the winter. Some of you haven't. We're going to go over all the vocabulary you need to understand, not just what to expect, but how Israelis get through it. Some of it we're not going to get to because it's a really big list that we've compiled over the years. And before I get to your questions and talk about next week's class, I'm going to show you a very cute commercial from one of the local municipalities here in Israel that talks a lot about how much we care about the winter and a very specific thing that does indeed happen in Israel during the winter that really both excites and scares people in Israel. Excites and scares in a good way, I should preface. With that, let's get started. As always, I'm going to share the vocabulary spreadsheet that goes with this class. You will get a copy of this spreadsheet. Don't worry, you will get a copy. You are welcome to old school pen and paper, screenshot rather, or just sit back and enjoy the class. You will definitely get a copy of this. All right, so first off, first things first. How do we say winter in Hebrew? Choref. Choref, 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 however you pronounce the letter resh, this is the word for winter. Okay? A bunch of words that have to do with weather, because as every day, Israelis are very fixated on the weather, and we'll get to another reason why that is, not just so you're dressed and ready to face whatever there is, but there's also an economic reason why it's important to know what the weather is outside. So first off, how do you say weather? Mezeg ha'avir. Okay, mezeg ha'avir, the weather. Okay, bachutz, outside. Bifnim, inside. Important words to know for sure. And the words that give us also that when we talk about the air and weather, we need to know about words related. So first off, or avir is air. Avira, which is just simply a hey at the end of the word, means both atmosphere, like the atmosphere up in miles or kilometers up from the Earth's surface, to atmosphere or is in ambiance, right? Like the mood in the room was tense. This is the term that you would use, avira, right? Or the atmosphere in this restaurant is especially fun. This is the word that you would use. Okay? From the same root, we get the word mavrel, an important appliance, not necessarily in the winter, but an important one to have. A mavrel is a fan. Okay? It's usually an electric fan. You don't normally call a manual fan a mavrel, rather, one that oscillates, whether it's your unit air conditioner or it's an individual piece, a mavrel, all coming from the word avil. Avil, in fact, gave us the original word for an airplane in modern Hebrew. Obviously, airplanes didn't exist in biblical Hebrew and in Talmudic Hebrew. They needed to come up with a word. Um, and the first iteration of an airplane in Hebrew was aviron, right? Taking the word avir, and it was modeled off the French word avion, right? Avion is how you say airplane in French. The idea was it sounded close enough, and at that point, French was still a major language in international affairs. That made the most sense and a great way to transition into the modern era. That fell the way of our current word matos. Matos comes from from the same root that gives us the verb latus, which is to fly a vehicle, right? So instead of going from the more European sounding word, we went to something sounding a little bit more indigenous, even though again, airplane aviation isn't something necessarily indigenous to the Middle East here, right? Let's move on. Before we get to Choref, we have to talk about the previous season. Now, in Israel, we have a lot of microclimates. So there are indeed places in the country that have four full seasons. In Israel, if you're lucky to have four seasons, the one that just happened was Stav. Stav is fall or autumn, depending on your English. And just like in other countries, especially in the Northern Hemisphere, where there is Stav, there's also Shalechet to be seen in Israel. It's not so common. Usually it's in more northern places with trees that normally do this in the year, but shalechet is the word that we have for falling leaves, or the act of falling leaves. It's a beautiful word that describes a whole action. We don't have the same phenomenon like you do, for example, in North America of what they call leaf peeping, right? Where you go to a place to watch the leaves change color and then ultimately fall. But there are certainly places, whether it's in Jerusalem, other places up in the mountains or farther north where it gets colder and they have more trees that have leaves. You'll see that. But at this time of year, you find a lot of different types of meteorology. For example, um, the word dreary or blustery is a great term to have, right? Dreary, blustery, rainy, sagrir in Hebrew. Sagrir or sagriri, right? Sorry, just one second. Dreary, blustery, rainy, sagrir is the activate, sagriri is the adjective. Okay. Um, Two important words that I was talking about the financial aspects of knowing the weather. Where this one is a good clue. Me'unan and anan. Me'unan is cloudy, right? Like it's cloudy outside. And anan is a cloud. Ananim are clouds, right? You're going to need to know these words in a little bit when we talk about it. One of the most important things that defines the wintertime in Israel is that this is the rainy season, right? This is when rain is supposed to fall in Israel and traditionally does. And as a result, we play a lot of words have to do with rain and precipitation and water coming from the sky, for lack of a better term. Okay. So for example, sorry, just one second. Um, we know the word geshem, right? Geshem is what we normally define as rain, but Geshem in particular in Israel means heavy rain. Okay. Geshem is not any kind of rain. It is specifically heavy rain. And those of you who've been in Israel in the winter, you know heavy rain. It's intense, right? Sometimes it's only for 5 minutes, sometimes even longer. Last winter was especially rainy. Um, but Geshem is hard rain, not just any rain, hard rain. If you just want to say a rain shower, we have another word, and this word gives us the root of a lot of words that we use in everyday Hebrew, because the actuality is that rainfall in Israel is often much lighter. It's not a downpour every time. Oftentimes it's a rain shower, and that word in Hebrew is matar. Okay, matar, matar, matar. This is the word that we use also. Those of you who are more religiously minded, right? You'll know this word because this is what you pray for. It's the reason why you pray for rain in the winter season. V'ten talu matara pnei adama, and may there be tal, dew, D-E-W, and matar, rain, um, on the surface of the earth, right? On the face of the earth. Matar is not heavy rain. Matar is steady showers. And from that, we get the modern Hebrew word mimtarim, showers. Right. This is a modern word. This actually, there's a great story about this. I was just watching the other day. This caused a huge controversy in Israel. That mim tarim is a new word. How do you explain showers in Hebrew, in modern Hebrew, in a meteorological setting? This was a new term that was created. It was very controversial at the time, and now we just take it for granted. That's the word that we use, mim tarim, right? Okay. Our next word is definitely a brand new word because this word did not exist in biblical Hebrew, is mitria. Mitria is an umbrella. Okay, where do we get this? Again, from the same root that gives us matar, mimtarim. There's also another word I didn't put in here, mamtera, which is a water sprinkler, right? Mitria is an umbrella. Taking it and turning it into a modern word, taking the root that means showers, the thing that helps you with rain umbrella. Okay. So mitria is an umbrella. And then finally, for drizzle is tiftuf. Tiftuf is literally drops. It's meant to be an onomatopoeia. Excuse me, it's meant to be an onomatopoeia type word, right? Tiftuf, something that is mitaftif, is dripping or dropping on your roof or on some surface. But tiftuf we use in modern day Hebrew as drizzle. Okay. Now that we've done a lot of those words, let's get to some other with regards to precipitation, because this is the season for it, is the word for storm. Storm in Hebrew is both a sufa and a se'ara. What's the difference between the two? Not a whole lot. They're very similar terms. Um, okay, they mean very similar things. They're used interchangeably, and that's totally all right. Se'ara is used more for metaphorical storms. Like if you saw a headline that said Se'ara Bakneset, a stormy session in the Knesset, right? It'll be Se'ara. But both of them mean a meteorological storm. Okay. And then finally, So'er. From the word Se'ara, we get the adjective stormy, So'er. So'er, So'eret, So'arim, So'arot. In Hebrew, again, because the land of Israel is mainly dependent for thousands of years on rain as its form of precipitation and its form of fresh water, we have a lot of special words that come from that. And one of those are the words for the first rain of the season and the last rain of the season. The first proper rain of the season, and I mean Geshem, not Tiftuf, not even Mimtarim, rain is Yoreh. Okay, the Yoreh. And the last rain of the season is Malkosh. You know it's that time of year because it almost perfectly aligns with when in Jewish tradition we start praying for rain and we stop praying for rain. So essentially from the end of Sukkot to Pesach, Passover, is the rainy season. And so it starts with the Yoreh, ends with the Malkosh. Those are two very specified names for this time of year. Okay. Now, we get to another fun phenomenon in Israel that is very unique and very exciting um, to this uh, part of the Middle East, which is sheleg. Sheleg is snow. We do have different terms for how strong the storm is, but sheleg is sheleg, snow. We don't make as much differences between if it's a heavy snowstorm or a blizzard or sleet or freezing rain or all the things that epitomize winter in colder climates, because we're not that cold, but it does indeed snow in Israel. It's a very big deal. It typically snows the higher up you are. So it can snow as much in the Golan, which is higher up. There are parts of the Golan that always receive snow, and there are parts that don't, because it's about elevation. It's not about north and south. Because in the center and even south of the country that are high up enough, you'll also get sheleg. Okay, and we're going to come back to that before the end of the class with some fun use of the language we're learning here. When we talk about snow in Israel, it's obviously not just if it's going to fall, but also is it going to pile up? Is it going to accumulate? The verb that we use is lehe'arem, right? It comes from the same root where we get a pile of something, a pile of leaves, a pile of snow, a pile of clothes, which is arema, right? From the same root we get to pile up. So the forecast will tell you if it's going to snow, if it is sheleg ye'arem, if the snow will pile up. Okay, very important for those who care about that. A good preview of what's coming up. Okay, the next bunch of words all have to do with basic feelings, but also have to do with weather, hot and cold. Let's start with the cold, because that is wintertime. Cold as a noun is kol. Cold as an adjective is kal. Okay, kal, kara, karin, karot. If you want to say I'm cold, and we're going to go through the opposite as well. If you want to say I'm cold, regardless of your gender, you're going to say I'm cold, temperature wise. You're going to say karli. Okay, that doesn't change, regardless if it's masculine or feminine, which is why I'm going to put on the left-hand side if you weren't noticing. I put the gender as well. Karli. Karli, you'll say if you're male or female. Okay. And cool, not cool as in the slang term cool, but cool as in I'm not cold, I'm not hot, I'm somewhere in the middle, and it's not warm, it's cool, karir. We have an expression in Hebrew that translates best to freezing cold. In Hebrew, we say kol klavim. I'm saying in Hebrew, but it's actually in Israel because kol klavim, one of the guesses where this came from is from Russian. That has an expression that it's so cold out, even the dogs are cold, right? Think about a stereotypical view of Siberia and someone has Siberian Huskies. When the dogs are cold, you know it's really cold out. So kol klavim is used all the time in Israel to just mean it's really cold outside. Literally, it's cold, cold of the dogs. Okay, this is an expression that came to us from Russian with various different permutations, but in everyday Hebrew, it simply means freezing cold. Okay, kol is cold, like I said, klavim, dogs. Just means really cold out. Um, One of the things that also happens a lot in Israel this time of year is that it's very yavesh outside. When it's not raining and that you don't have precipitation, it can be very yavesh. Yavesh is dry. That's as much about the avira, the air, the atmosphere, the avir, but also avira outside, but also a piece of clothing, fabric, whatever it may be, can be dry, yavesh. The opposite, ratuv. Okay. Um, And then we have the word, where is it? Lach. Lach is humid. Lach also means something else, which I know a lot of people have an aversion to this word, so I'm not necessarily going to say it out loud, but it begins with an M and it ends with oist. Okay, lach means that, but it also means humid. Okay, and that same word as a noun, also humidity in Hebrew, it's the same thing, is lachut. We talk about this a lot. Obviously, the higher the lachut, the more chances it is going to rain. In Israel, typically on the coast, it's very lach, outside in the summer, but not lach enough to cause it to rain. Okay. Na'im is pleasant. Temperatura is the acceptable way to say the temperature. There is a proper Hebrew word, but it's not used nearly as much. That goes a lot about the evolution of languages, not just Hebrew, but many others. Ma'alot is how we tell the temperature. So, for example, today it was 22 ma'alot b'Tel Aviv. It was 22 degrees Celsius in Israel. Remember, folks, this is Israel. Unlike maybe two countries in the world, we use the metric system here. If the metric system is hard, you can use a very rough, quick conversion, which I always use, which is whatever the temperature is in Celsius, multiplied by 2 and add 30. You'll get a rough guess within a few degrees of the Fahrenheit. Okay. Another thing that's very common here in winter, as opposed to in North America, this is very common in the summer, but in Israel, this is only a winter phenomenon, is barad. Barad is hail. This is a word that already comes to us from the Tanakh, from the Bible. It's one of the 10 plagues, barad. Barad in modern Hebrew is also a slushy drink. If you get one of those machines, whether it's iced coffee or a flavored drink, it's called barad, right? The idea that it's slushy. Hail obviously is not slushy, but that's the idea. Yep. Um, Tense or volatile, we often call the atmosphere outside, not just inside a room, like a tense meeting, but we also call when it feels like there's an electrical storm going to happen. We call it matuach, tense or volatile. And even the weather can be kitzoni, extreme, and bilti yatziv, unstable. These are all very expressive terms to describe, especially when you're reading weather forecasts in Israel to get to know what's happening. Okay. Yatziv is the opposite of that. We have a whole bunch of other words. I want to skip down because I want to talk about something really important here, which is, first off, I want to get rid of that because that's wrong, is this word right here. Bidud termi. In wanting to teach this class, and I teach it every year, but I want to talk more about, so Jay, why did you just make fun of people who say that 22 degrees isn't something to rub in people's faces because you think it's cold? Well, if you look around, you'll see a lot of people in Israel already bundled up. Because 22 degrees during the day means that it's going to get quite colder at night. But more importantly, in people's homes, it's going to be cold. Why is that the case? And it comes to do something that I had to look up and do a little bit of research on, which is in Hebrew, bidud termi. Bidud is a term that we all know, right? Bidud is the term that we used for a couple years, in the last few years, to mean quarantine, right? It normally means isolation. Bidud is the word we use for quarantine. It also means isolation. Telmi sounds just like what it should be, thermal. Okay, bidud telmi is what we call thermal insulation. Okay? The same word bidud that means isolation also means insulation. And in Hebrew, bidud telmi applies to all forms. It could be clothing, right? What do you wear to stay warm? It can also mean buildings. And this is the important thing. Okay. So with that, why is that important? Because oftentimes people will say, why is it so cold in Israel? And I had to look this up. Bidud Telmi is an important thing, and that gets into financial things because in Israel, we do have building standards, right? Buildings have to comply with certain standards, how they're built, what they're made with, and things like that. In Israel, the original building standards, when it comes to bidud telmi, thermal insulation, was written and compiled in 1965. Okay? In 1965, not only did we not have a significant change in the weather, I'm not going to get into issues of climate change or not, folks. It's real. If you want to fight with me with that, this is not the time for it. But what we definitely did not have in Israel is the amount of air conditioners that we have throughout every house in the country nowadays. We take it for granted. In 1965, for sure, people didn't have it. And so the idea in 1965 in the Middle East was how do we stay cool? Not how do we stay hot? How do we stay cool? And so buildings, as a result, don't come with the same insulation, even though Bidud Telmi refers to saving you energy by both preserving the cool or the hot air in-house per season. Okay? But the fact of the reality is we care more about preserving the coolness because it's hotter more during the year than it is cold. And buildings are built still to this day like that, even with air conditioners built in. So that's also a reason why people are very cold at this time of year. Unless you're living in a very cold climate, you don't live in a place that has bidud tell me that traps in the heat. Because why would you want to trap in the heat all year round? Only those few months of the year when it gets cold. That's an issue. And that's another reason why native Israelis get so cold this time of year, even if your native place of origin 22, 23, 24, 25 degrees even is considered hot. It's another reason why you'll see, for example, a lot of North Americans walking around in much shorter clothes this time of year, t-shirts and even shorts and flip-flops, and Israelis are already bundled up. Okay, it's what are you used to? Not just in general, but especially this issue of bidud tilmi. And that gets into the issue of lachut and more importantly, retivut. Retivut comes from the word wet. These are the things that happen at this time of year. Not just because it rains, but because you're trapping in so much different temperatures from the inside and outside, you get things not just like lachut in your house and nizila, leaks from rain. You also get ovesh. Ovesh is something very common in Israel because when you don't have bidud tilmi, you don't have a means of regulating the temperature in a way that keeps you at a comfortable level and deals with what's outside. And as a result, many buildings in Israel have ovesh. It's a completely normal thing. Ovesh means mold. Okay. Ovesh shachor, black mold, is a very common thing in Israel. It is not any judgment on anyone on this call or anyone who happens to have it. It is a normal thing to happen in Israel because windows are not insulated, buildings are not insulated. Condensation, our word down here, ibui, happens because of that sharp difference in temperatures inside and outside. And the resulting issue is ovesh. It's easily cleanable. You can get specific cleaners just for ovesh. They're usually more sold at hardware stores than they are in everyday stores, but you can, those of you who use bleach can also use that, but there is specific things for ovesh and it quickly goes away. No one is to be ashamed of having ovesh in their home in Israel because it usually is a common thing. There are more severe cases of it. I don't want to either discredit that. I do want to separate those cases. When you have severe neglect, that's a different level of ovesh. But if it's everyday little black dots, that usually means there's issues of condensation that you just can't deal with unless you're going to do a massive overhaul of your house. Okay, moving on fast because we have a lot of words here and I want to take your questions as I see we have quite a number. Chom. Chom is the opposite of coal, heat. Okay, chom is heat. Cham is the adjective. Okay, so if heat is chom, hot as in temperature is hot and cham. And just like karir is cool, chamim is warm. Okay. And then we have the words to warm up and to get warmed. Lechamem is to warm, as in to warm up. And to get warmed up is lehitchamem. Okay, lechamem and lehitchamem both mean warming up. It's just who's doing what. If something warms you up, that is lechamem. If you are getting warmed up personally or someone else is, lehitchamem. Okay. Just like we said, karli is I'm cold, as in temperature. The opposite is chamli, I'm hot, temperature-wise. Folks, it's really important you say chamli or karli. You may not translate. We've talked about this in several classes, and this is a very stern reminder for everyone on this call. You may not translate literally from English. If you translate literally from English, you are saying something very different about your state of nature. Right? When you say I'm hot, literally translating from English, that is a very different term. And there are three X's there for a reason. Understand that as you will. I think we're all adults on this call. You can figure that out. And if we're already talking about hot, the third kind of hot, spicy, is kharif. Okay, it means spicy, but we in English use the term hot. That is important. Okay, why do I keep talking about the weather and economics, not just in terms of bidud, tell me? This is an important thing if you don't know this already in Israel, dud chashmal and dud shemesh. Why am I talking about this during the winter? Great question. In Israel, for the last 30 plus years, all new buildings, I think it's even longer than that, all new buildings are required, especially when it's residences, are required to be equipped with a dud shemesh, a solar water heater. This is that white tank that sits on the top of your building's roof with one or two solar panels. And the idea is that it is creating the hot water that you need in the house, pending solar heat, solar energy, right? This is why it gets important to know the forecast, because if the forecast says it's me'unan, cloudy, that not only means you can't dry your clothes um, by air because it's not going to be sunny enough, you're also going to probably have to use a dud chashmal. The Dud Chashmal is what pretty much everyone in this country has. A Dud Chashmal is an electric water heater. It's that red button switch that many of us have next to our kitchens or our bathrooms. And by turning it on, we're turning on the Dud Chashmal. Your Dud Shemesh, if you have one, is automatic, right? If it's a sunny day and it's warm enough, you don't have to turn on the hot water because you'll have hot water generated by the solar panel on your rooftop. Dud Chashmal, though, if it's a gray, gloomy day like it had been for the last few days here in Tel Aviv, you have to turn it on if you want hot water. There's no other way to get hot water other than flipping that switch, which may take as quickly as 15 minutes, sometimes even longer to get enough hot water to take showers, to wash dishes, to cook with, etc. Okay, so that's why it's also important to know the forecast because if it's going to be me'unan, cloudy outside, you're going to need to know do I need to turn on the dud chashmal and also factor that in because oftentimes it takes up a lot of electricity and it costs a lot of money. And folks, if you aren't paying attention to the news, which we also talk about here, prices for everything, including electricity, are going to go up at starting next year. And next year is only a few days away. Very important you know how this works. So you need to watch the weather to also save money. Do I need to turn on the Dud Chashmal? Or not is a common occurrence in Israel. And it's often why in the forecast, they'll talk a lot about how cloudy it is. Is it meunan, cloudy? Is it only meunan chelkit? Those words are all in this list. We're just not going to have the time to go through all of them. Okay. Meunan chelkit, by the way, partly cloudy. Another thing that's used a lot this time of year to stay warm, again, because of that thermal insulation thing we talked about, is a mifazel chom. Mifazel comes from the verb lifazel, which is to dissipate, to put out, to spread out, and chom is heat. A mifazel chom is a space heater. It's usually in the form of a fan. So there's the function of a me'avrel, a word we already had, right? And it has these coils that if you turn on the heat, the coils heat up, and the heat that's produced from them, combined with the fan's actions, create hot air that blows out. This is a very easy and fast way to turn a room very warm fast. It, number one, also uses up a lot of electricity. And number two, it's easily catches on fire. There are a lot of issues of accidents this time of year where heating appliances catch on fire. This is one that's very easily catch on fire. A lot of houses have these little white mifazrei chom, but you need to be very careful about how to use them. The other thing that's used this time of year is a radiator. A radiator is not like what you're thinking about in colder climates where you have it built into your walls or floors. Rather, it's usually on wheels. It looks the same thing, right? Those white coils, sort of a rectangular look, but it's usually electric. It's not connected to your gas or electric central heating. Rather, it's something mobile. And so you can move it around and position in different places of your house. It doesn't have a fan that blows the air out in the same way, but it does radiate heat. Radiator, radiator. Okay, this time of year, there are some things that are very traditional to eat. Some of these you know, some of these you may not know. First off is marak. Marak is the word for soup. Any kind of soup is marak. The word for, I'm going to skip around a little bit here, for broth, however, consomme, stock, whatever you want to call it, is tzir. Tzir is sometimes in marak, but a marak is not a tzir, right? You know cooking differences. If not, I leave you to figure that out. If we're going even more in terms of things that are thicker, that are in liquid form, is nazid. Nazid is a stew, Stew, right? Nazid is anything with big chunks in it, a very popular thing to have this time of year. Another thing that's popular, especially in the morning, is daisa. Daisa is best thought of as porridge. It is not oatmeal. We talked about oatmeal a few weeks ago when we talked about words of English origin in Hebrew. Daisa is more like cream of wheat. If you're from North America, or farina from elsewhere in the world, it's a thinner, it's a smaller, rather, individual grain. Think of it like grits or even like gruel, that's made into a hot, thick meal, especially for breakfast. Sachlav is a very popular drink this time of year throughout the Middle East. Sachlav in Hebrew, like in a lot of Middle Eastern languages, means orchid. Traditionally, this was made with the mashed and boiled root of a wild orchid in Israel. Don't think of the orchids that you buy in a greenhouse. It's a different type of flower altogether. Nowadays, it's usually made with cornstarch. It's a very popular drink this time of year. You usually put like ground peanuts and coconut flakes and maybe a little drops of rose water in it. It's very popular in Israel and throughout the Middle East. And it's very warm, so it's a very warming type of drink. Another very popular snack this time of year is called, um, uh, a nickname of it is wintertime ice cream, is klembo. Klembo is not an Israeli invention. Don't let anyone believe you otherwise. Klembo actually comes from Northern Europe. The idea was, how do we recreate the experience of ice cream in the winter? And so the idea is, it's a biscuit, it's a round cookie with a big blob of marshmallow fluff on top, and then it's covered in a chocolate shell. It's very popular in Israel. It comes mainly in two flavors in Israel, and at least on a commercial level: vanilla, and mocha. Okay, very popular. People often hoard these because they only come out in the wintertime, because between the marshmallow and the chocolate, it doesn't survive in hot weather. Some people will put them automatically in the freezer to eat them. Some people will serve them all different ways. If you want to get into a fight in Israel really fast, you debate what is the correct way to eat a combo. Because this is a serious thing, folks. Some people will get very angry. You have to eat the biscuit first. You have to eat the chocolate first. You have to eat the whole thing in one bite. You have to, all sorts of different permutations. People take eating klembo very seriously, so tread that very carefully. The next part that I have here is all winter clothing. Unfortunately, we're not going to have time to go through all of it here. I just want to focus on a few things that are really important, is the difference between, just like in English, a coat and a jacket. In Hebrew, there are two differences in a coat and a jacket. A jacket is jacket, and a coat is a me'il. The simple difference is, a coat, like in English, a me'il, in Hebrew, is a heavier thing, usually wool, maybe some other form of material, but it's a heavier item used for colder weather. Jacket can be worn in any kind of weather. Maybe it's more lightweight, maybe it's heavyweight, but the point is, just as there's a difference in English between coat and jacket, me'il and jacket also have differences. I don't have time to go through all these, unfortunately, so I leave them to you. But I will give you, for example, a preview of our Wednesday Cafe Oleh conversation class. I'll talk about it again in a few minutes at the top of the hour. We're going to be going over this vocabulary in the context of giving each other's tips, or asking for tips on how to survive the winter in Israel. Like I said, the longer you're here, the more you'll understand it gets cold in the winter wherever you are in the country. How do you survive? Right? So we're going to share with each other what to wear, what to eat, what to do to stay warm and survive the winter, and also enjoy it, maybe. What we're going to talk about now, before I take your questions, is this word. This is the big deal in Israel, folks. If you've never been here in the wintertime, or you've never followed the news in the wintertime, we go nuts. over weather, especially when it rains, but particularly when there's the threat of snow. And like I said, the first place that it usually snows in Israel is up in Har Hermon, Mount Hermon in the Golan. It then comes down the country by elevation, not just geographically north to south. So higher elevations in the north will get them first. Then it'll seep down to Israel, to the center of the country, what they call Harei HaMelkaz, the central mountains. It'll even go as far as Har HaNegev, Mount Negev, the Negev mountain in the south, because it's so high up. And yes, indeed, the big draw at this time of year is it going to snow in Jerusalem? People go nuts over this, even for a few flurries they lose their mind. And what we're going to watch right now to put all these words together, I'm going to translate a little bit and I'm going to let you enjoy the rest of it, is the Jerusalem municipality put out a great commercial last year about everyone's hype about the snow. They have a great social media presence. And what you're going to see here is a little self-explanatory, but I'm also going to translate a little bit together with you. So let me just pull it up first. And obviously, we'll share this link with you after with the write-up for today's class. Okay. Sorry, where is it? Here we go. Share sound. Okay, what we're watching is from last year, 2023. This is from the Jerusalem municipality. Okay, and it follows, I'll translate the first few lines because you'll get it very quickly. But let's just say, just like in other countries, you don't want to jinx something as exciting as potential snowfall. It's a big deal in Israel. That pretty much tells you this clip.
Hi.
So he comes in, this guy very bundled up for the winter, right? You have all the words about that in your vocabulary sheet. He says, Hi, hafuch katan al shkedim vaksha. Hi, could I get a small hafuch, right? Our version of a cafe latte in Israel, al shkedim, on with almond milk, please, right? That's how you would order that. A small cafe latte with almond milk, please. Hafuch katan al shkedim vaksha.
הפוך קטן על שקדים בבקשה.
בטח.
Betach, she says, of course.
כל כך קר בחוץ?
Kol kach kar bachutz, is it so kar, that word we already had, and bachutz we already had. Is it that cold outside?
עוד מתרגל לקור ירושלמי, אני די חדש פה.
What does he say?
כל כך קר בחוץ?
עוד מתרגל לקור...
Od mitragel lakor hayurushalmi, right? You can follow along with the subtitles at the bottom. Kol kach Od mitragel lakor hayurushalmi. I'm still getting used to the Jerusalem cold, cold, Yerushalmi, Jerusalemite, right? The adjective of the form Yerushalayim. Ani dei chadash po. I'm very new here, right? He's not from Jerusalem. He's visiting. He's a student there, whatever it may be. He's still getting used to the Jerusalem cold, right? Jerusalem in the winter is cold. It's up in the mountains.
קור ירושלמי, אני די חדש פה.
Baruch haba. Welcome, she says.
ברוך הבא.
תודה. תגידי, יש סיכוי ש...
Now, what does he say here? Thank you. Tell me, is there a chance that tomorrow, that amur laredet machar, yesh sikui she'amur laredet machar, is there a chance that they're supposed to fall tomorrow? Laredet means to fall down or to come down. This is the word that we use for precipitation. Watch what he says, right? He wants to say, is there a chance it's going to snow tomorrow? But what happens when he tries to say the word for snow, sheleg?
אמור לרדת מחר.
מה?
לא, שאלתי אם אמור לרדת מחר.
He says, no. After she says that she didn't hear what he said,
יש
with a
סיכוי
stern look.
שאמור לרדת מחר.
מה?
לא.
No, I asked if it's supposed to tomorrow.
שאלתי אם אמור לרדת מחר.
הנה הקפה שלך.
In a very terse way, hina kafe shelcha. Here's your coffee. Right? locals know better than to say the word.
סליחה? סורי. אתה...
סליחה, sorry, excuse me, sorry. אתה יודע אם אמור מחר לרדת, and you can even see in the subtitles, it's blanked out.
יודע אם אמרו מחר לרדת
אמבו. אמבו.
כרטיסים לביקורת.
כרטיסים לביקורת, the inspector comes around making sure that everyone has their cards validated, their tickets for the light rail.
היי, סורי.
sorry, פשוט, I'm simply asking, do you know tomorrow if it's supposed to...
פשוט, את יודעת אם מחר אמור לרדת סליחה, סליחה, מחר יורד מישהו יודע אם מחר יורד מחר יורד
בננה!
יש מחר הזה שיורד מישהו
Right? The thing that falls from the sky.
הלבן
Right? The white stuff. He says, does someone see me? Ani shakuf? Am I invisible?
אני שקוף?
He opens the weather app, and what does it say to him? Azov, shachrer, bemet azov. Leave it alone. Don't bother with it. Seriously, bemet azov. Leave it.
מגפיים?
Magafaim, you'll learn in our vocabulary, means boots.
גזר?
Gezer, carrot. Mazchelet, shovel.
ילדה? זה אומר שמחר יורד
And what does she say? לא פותחים פה לש. You get the snow of the screen. And it says, להתנהג רגיל חברים. Behave normally, friends. לא לפתוח פה. Don't open your mouth. מה שיהיה יהיה. Whatever will be, with 3 crossed fingers. Right? In Hebrew, there's a expression, לא פותחים פה לשטן. Don't open your mouth, literally don't open your mouth for Satan, but it means don't put a jinx on something, right? Don't put words in the mouth of something you don't otherwise want to happen, right? So if you don't want something to happen, don't necessarily say it out loud, right? It's the idea of jinx or the evil eye, whatever it may be. And so the little girl is teaching him a Yerushalmi secret. We don't say the word sheleg out loud if we want it actually to snow, right? Lo potrim pe le sheleg is what she's trying to say. And that's this, right? It's telling people, as the Jerusalem municipality, lehitnaheg ragil chaverim, behave normally, folks. Lo liftuach pe, don't jinx the potential of snow. Ma sheyeh yeh, whatever will be. Take it easy, but at the same time, fingers crossed, because everyone wants to see it snow in Jerusalem. As chaotic as it is, there's nothing quite like it. Okay, with that, I'm going to stop here. Answer some questions. Before I do, first off, toda rabah, thank you all for joining. Like I said, Wednesday's class, our Cafe Oleh conversation, which is a great way to practice your Hebrew in general, and especially the topics we go over here. This week on Wednesday, there's still plenty of time to sign up. We're going to be going over this vocabulary in the context of giving each other and asking each other advice for surviving the winter in Israel. If you don't want to join us for that, or you already want to know what we're talking about next week, I'm just looking it up. Next week is the winter holiday in Israel. This is our annual survey, I guess you want to say, of how we celebrate Israel's biggest wintertime holiday. And despite there being all sorts of different ways of how to transliterate this holiday from Hebrew to English, there's only one way to pronounce it in Hebrew. You're going to hear my annual rant that this holiday is not about breastfeeding or nursing. That verb in Hebrew is lehanik, or the act of doing it is hanakah in modern Hebrew. Instead, this holiday is Chanukah. Chanukah. We're going to talk all about Chanukah next week, how it's celebrated in Israel, the terms you need to know that you've probably not used, and how your traditions from around the world, but how they're said in Hebrew in Israel and how they manifest, including always putting down the definitive way how to pronounce this holiday. It is Chanukah. With that, let me answer some questions in the Q&A. Okay, can you say Geshem Chazak? Absolutely. Very strong rain. We use that term a lot. Geshem Chazak. It's the name of a popular song from the 1990s here in Israel, but it's also, yes, strong rain. Absolutely. Geshem is usually stronger, but Geshem Chazak, a downpour, you could think of it as. Why do you spell mitria with two yods? A great question. I will refer you to our previous lesson we've done on how do you spell in Israel in Hebrew and the rules for spelling in modern Hebrew. But basically, we have what we call ktiv maleh and ktiv chaser. One is full writing, literally full script, and the other is absent script. The idea is that because in modern Hebrew we do not use nikud, the dots and bars, to indicate vowel sounds other than teaching, like we do here, we have letters that represent vowel sounds or tell you more correctly how to pronounce a word so that you don't mess it with anything else. Mitria is a great example of that. There are two yuds towards the end of the word to indicate that it's iya. Those are two different sounds. Mitria, that there's a e sound, a long vowel, followed by the sound ya. If you didn't have those two yuds there, you wouldn't know how to pronounce it necessarily correctly. Okay. Could you give us the verb when you give us the noun? It's raining. Yes, I just showed that to you now. How do you say it's snowing? Same thing. Yored geshem. Okay, a geshem yored. I'll write that in the list before we send it out to you. What is the term for the drip irrigation system we install in gardens and farms? That's a different term altogether. We usually call that a ma'arechet hashkaya. It's a watering or a hydration system is another way to think about that. I'll add that as well. Thank you for asking. Can you write the transliteration for I'm cold? Absolutely. Karli, I'll add that in. Can na'im be used as an adjective for non-weather situations? Yes, na'im means pleasant. Folks, na'im means pleasant for anything. If you call someone or a situation na'im, it was nice or it was pleasant. Absolutely. Is lechamem the right verb to use when talking about heating up food? Absolutely. Ani mechamem et ha'ochel batanur. I'm heating up the food or warming up the food in the oven. Absolutely. Lechamem et ha'marak, yes, warming up soup, versus ani holech litchamem mul haradiator. I'm going to warm myself up or get warmed up by the radiator. Perfect use. Thank you for asking that question. I've often said anicha me'od. That is incorrect Hebrew. Even if people were polite enough not to say anything, do not ever say again anicha me'od. Even if the people are the most polite around you, that is incorrect Hebrew. The correct Hebrew is chamli. That means I'm hot temperature-wise. Anything else does not mean temperature-wise, no matter how polite people are around with you. Is tanur chimum used? Yes, you do hear of heating ovens, but they are much older. They're not as common, certainly to be easily purchased. But yes, there is such a thing as a tanur chimum. Tanur means oven. Chimum is warming. Okay. How do you say layers as in dress in the winter? I will add that word again. The word is shichva or shchavot, plural, but I will add that there. I'm just making notes to myself what words to include. Thank you for letting me know. Layers. What's the term for window insulation tape? Can you please add it to the list? I don't know. Again, folks, insulation is not a common thing in Israel unless you live in particularly cold climate, like in the very north of Israel. So what the tape is called, I couldn't tell you, honestly. So what did the guy say that was wrong to make everyone so miserable? You weren't paying attention, folks. Like I said, the expression that they use at the end, which comes from the Talmud, is lo potchim pe la satan. They turned it into lo potchim pe la sheleg. Don't say the word sheleg, otherwise it won't happen, right? All the Yerushalmim were excited for it to happen, but they know if you say it out loud, you've jinxed it from ever happening, right? And this newbie into town, all layered up, and everyone else is a little bit more normally dressed because they're used to the cold, keeps trying to say the word and he keeps getting shushed. If you didn't get the shh sound the whole time, that's what they were doing. They were shushing him from saying the word out loud. Of course, I will send the link of the video. Don't worry, folks, I got you covered. What should I wear today? Ma tzarich lilbosh hayom. Perfect. What do I wear today? What should I wear today? Great, I'm going to include that as well. What should I wear today? Great questions. Thank you so much for these great questions here, folks. As you know, I will go over the chat transcript tomorrow as we get a recording of this video uploaded to YouTube, update you all that we have both the vocabulary and the video up. Toda rabah, thank you all for joining. This recording will go up in the next day or so, and we definitely warmly invite you, to this week's Cafe Oleh Conversations, as well as obviously next week's class, and hope to see you all again. So until then, toda rabah and leitraot. See you all very soon.